Hello, today I'm going to be interviewing Angela Menzies, the wonderful author of Sammy's Worry, which is right over here. Angela, could you maybe introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Angela Menzies, and I'm actually an artist in my day job. This is my first book that I've actually written and published myself. And for about the last 30 years, I've been a children's art teacher. So Sammy's Worry is a picture book about anxiety, and it's about a
Hmm.
little girl that goes to bed at night, and she has a worry that is growing as she's going to sleep at night. The worry manifests itself as a monster. And as her anxiety symptoms increase and the physical sensations in her body get more extreme, the worry begins to grow and grow and grow. And he goes from being this, little fluffy monster to this giant, looming, terrifying beast that she then has to confront at the peak of her anxiety. She has to confront this big monster, this anxiety. And I this is was an interesting thing for me to sort of struggle with. Is I wanted the anxiety to be accessible to
Hmm.
children. I didn't want to make the worry so terrifying that if you didn't have
Yeah.
anxiety, I would now give it to you. I didn't want to, give you nightmares before bed. So I kind of flip-flopped a lot with, well, what is the worry going to look like? And it ended up being very cat-like, and it's modeled on, I have a great big huge fluffy cat, and the worry is actually modeled on my cat, because I wanted to make the worry a little bit familiar, little bit less threatening, even though the book is quite moody and atmospheric, and it's panoramic and immersive. I did want this sort of slight friendliness, so that it could become accessible for us to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah. For those watching, you can get the book at the links in the description. It's a great book. You should read it.
Thanks.
And yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Well, I just wanted to talk to you today about ask you about the process of creating Sammy's Worry and some of the challenges and things that might have come along the way, and just so it could be helpful for other people maybe watching
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
me or wherever. But shall we get into it?
You betcha.
Okay, so I was wondering why you chose the picture book medium. Like, what drew you to that than to something else? Like,
Oh,
what drew you to that idea of a picture book?
good question. I've actually always wanted to do one. I started collaborating with someone about 30 years ago, and I didn't know enough at the time how the process went. So I did all of the illustrations ahead, sent them to her, which is, you don't do that anymore. You send digital images only, even to publishers.
Oh
But I
yeah.
didn't know that. Yeah, sent her all the images, and I was just only about 18 at the time. And she never published the book. She kept all the illustrations. So it's something that I've always wanted to do. And then when I became a mom, so that'd be about 24 years ago, I just I knew I wanted to write a book for my kids. I didn't know what I wanted it to be about, though. I didn't have a real plan yet of what I wanted it to be about. Homeschooled my kids, was super, super busy, never got around to it. It took my kids moving out, growing up and moving out for me to have the time to do it. Um, but somewhere along the ways of raising kids, I thought it was going to be really important to write some growth mindset books about emotional regulation around issues like loneliness, grief, depression, anxiety, things like that. So I started with this book, which was about anxiety.
What and that's interesting because like you brought up like anxiety, which is interesting because a lot of picture books or children's books don't think about or focus on mental health. So
Mhm.
what is your thoughts on mental health being represented in children's books?
I think the earlier that we start talking to kids about mental health issues, the more normalized it's going to be. Because I feel like if you wait by the time you're an adult, there's a lot of stigma and shame attached to struggling in
Hmm.
general. So, I mean, if you're willing to ask your kid what was the best part of their day, you should also ask them what was the worst part of their day. It should be a normal thing to talk about. If you could talk about broken bones, why can't you talk about, broken hearts and
Yeah.
anxiety and all those things? So I think the earlier you can give kids the tools, for one thing, to emotionally regulate, but also the language to use to talk about it, I think the better off they're going to be, because we all struggle, and we struggle young, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
grew up with anxiety as a child, and I never had any tools to deal with it until I was well into adulthood, which is too late.
Yeah, like it's interesting because like that's one of the things that I've definitely noticed is that it's very like it's very prevalent in all ages. That like people have
Mhm.
struggles, they have anxiety, all these sort of things, but it's not really talked about very much. Like I found these things, these little gems. Where it's like, oh, they actually talked about it. They actually had these
Yeah,
things, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. And your
yeah.
book did that really well, I think.
Thank you.
But what inspired you to make Sammy's Worry itself? Where did the spark come from? Like, it doesn't have to be like, oh, the idea came from, because that's a very hard question. But like, where did the spark to like, okay, well, Sammy's Worry. Well, why do you think of? Oh, how did you come up with this? This monster. This. What made you think of that
Hmm.
concept?
As a child, I had a recurring nightmare of being, I was probably like 6 to 9, and I had this recurring nightmare of being chased through a stormy night through the woods by, it was a white dog actually. And it definitely poked its head up whenever I was super anxious about things. So it kind of came from that and just my own
Interesting.
experiences of anxiety. One of my sons struggled a lot with anxiety when he was younger. And again, I mean, this was going back many years now, over 20 years ago. I didn't see a lot of books on the market for children about anxiety. I think there's more now, but
Yeah.
there wasn't at the time. And so I just thought it just needed to be done, just needed to be told in a different way.
No, you see, yeah, like, if you go to the bookstore, you're like, okay, I'll go to like the nonfiction, sometimes nonfiction,
Yeah,
or some sections where they'll have like, anxiety, but it's very less often they have a fiction book about
yeah,
anxiety. They have lots
yeah.
of nonfiction about anxiety and lots of that kind of stuff. But I think
Mhm.
having a book that's fictional about anxiety is really interesting because it's like, it's a little easier to digest sometimes, and not just,
Yeah.
it's not like it's not saying to you, oh, you have something wrong with you. It's not that. It's just,
Mhm.
how can we get over this? How can we describe this? I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
I wanted to make a story that could stand on its own, aside from even talking about emotional regulation. That could just be an
yeah.
interesting story with beautiful illustrations and be moody and have all the great hallmarks of just a great picture book, but this additional layer added into it.
When did you start working on this book? Like, how long ago was it that you started doing it?
Well, that's a good point.
I know.
You know how long it takes. It going
Oh
back,
yeah.
I'm going to say about 3 or 4 years. I was working with students a lot in of the public school system, and we would often sit around and chat while we were working in small groups. I just started asking them, what types of things scare you, what types of things make you anxious, and we had a lot of really great conversations about it. And that's where it started. And then I'm going to say about 3 years ago, I actually sat down to do the writing, which was about a 6-month process. And it wasn't even finalized at that point in time. And what I found is, because I'm an artist first, I needed to actually just dive in and start illustrating, because for me to get to know the characters better, I had to draw them. That was just my process. So I sat down and did a couple drawings first, did one formalized painting first of what I knew I wanted Sammi to look like. Actually, I had the first illustration I ever did is here. I'll show it to you.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Thank you. So I was working on what I wanted Sammi to look like. I didn't know what I wanted the worry to look like yet, but I knew I wanted it to be furry and hairy. So that's all that shows up in this one. I didn't know yet what he was going to look like. The illustration process took a year, and then it took about another 6 months to get it published. So all in all, it was about a 3-year journey from thinking about it, sketching about it, writing down ideas. Yeah, right to getting a copy in my hands.
Oh yeah, it takes a long time, and people don't always realize that. Like, if
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, and it like people will talk to, and like I've seen people be like, oh yeah, when did you do it? Yeah, like how was long? It was just like it was been like a few years. Like what? It's like, oh yeah, it's been a long time, and
Yeah.
yeah, it can take a long time to get this working because often you're doing like the like working out what exactly you're trying to do, and then you
Yes.
actually try to do it, and then
Yeah.
um
Yeah. and then the
But
editing, and then
yeah, oh,
tweaking
the
and going
editing, yeah.
back. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
lot of
Oh
work.
yeah, I know exactly. And
Yeah.
one of my other questions was what came first, the art or the story? And it seems like the art kind of like influenced the story a bit. How much did the art like you said the art like influenced how you did the story? Like
Yeah.
did things in your mind change because of how did you discover something in the artistic process like, oh, I want to include that in the book, or was it
Um,
more of a
hmm. I definitely, funny enough, I ended up doing most of the art before the story was finalized
interesting?
because I could see what I wanted it to look like. And then it
Yeah.
was a matter of, okay, well, what did I show that I don't need to necessarily tell now in detail? Sometimes it was big things, sometimes it was little things. So little things like the moody atmosphere. I knew because I'd done the illustrations and you've got the lightning and the
Yeah.
fog on the trees and all that stuff. I didn't have to, for the purposes of a children's book, go into a lot of detail describing that.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and then on the very last illustration, not to spoiler alert this for anybody, but the
Yeah.
last illustration, the words in the book say that she couldn't really find the worry anymore when she woke up, but I had already illustrated that panel, and what I knew, what we all know, is that the worry is hiding on the top of her head. It's still there, and I
Yeah.
wanted to sort of have this idea that you're never not going to be worried about something. It's
Exactly.
unrealistic to think that you're going to, defeat it and then go the rest of your life without any anxiety ever again. So the art for me was more, it was fun because I could figure out what exactly I wanted to show. And then when I was going through the editing process, I cut a lot of text out that was, sort of roughed in that, okay, I don't need to say this explicitly. The art
Yeah.
shows it.
That's interesting because like a lot of advice in writing is show not tell, and like by
Yes.
using the art you can show. You don't have to just
Yes.
tell the reader thing. Like they can pick up on things like at the end you
Hmm.
talked about there. They can pick up on those
Yeah.
like, oh look, they can pick up on those little details themselves, and it
Yeah.
makes it a little bit more interesting and immersive, I think.
I hope so. Yeah. Immersive. That's a really good, yeah, that's a good description.
Yeah, so you did the art, you did the writing. What does the process look like? It's like a big process, but like can you give me like an idea of how it went? Like you did the art, you did the writing, but like
Mhm.
what were the how did it go from say the art to the book in your hand? Like what was the general timeline generally of what you kind of did?
Yeah, it took a year to illustrate. So once I had the basic story arc, I started first by putting together a book dummy. So that's where you
Hmm.
map out how many pages your book's going to go, rough in text of what the text is going to look like, thumbnail sketches. And then after a few thumbnail sketches of what I knew I would want a page to look like, I did a mock-up drawing that was the same size as the original paintings. Got that done, and then I would transfer using a light table that to my good paper that I was using. And then I would ink it and then I would paint it. So from the start, I would say for each double panel illustration, maybe about 10 days from when I, knew, okay, this is, I'm drawing the image of what I want it to look like, transfer, it was a good 10 days. And then I took often breaks in between them. So
Yeah.
I was doing maybe 2 panels a month, maybe one, yeah, about 2 panels a month.
I mean, it depends on how your life looks like at that point. It's like, oh,
Oh
I did
yeah.
this, but
Oh
yeah,
yeah. Yeah. Yes. There was probably a month or two where I didn't do anything
no,
actually,
yeah.
because I
Oh,
just
I know
knew.
how that feels.
Exactly. Well, you're always percolating in the back of your head though, right? So you're not actively working on it, but you're
No,
thinking about it. And then all of a
yeah.
sudden the most random idea is going to come out of nowhere. Yeah.
Yeah. Like your writing process was there any like because we've talked about your art process. What about
Yeah.
like the writing? Was it difficult to do the writing, or was it there were any things you had to think about when you're doing that? What was it? Because it's like it's not writing a novel; it's writing a picture book. So you're trying to think how do these
Yeah.
interact with the pictures? Were there any challenges, and what kind of went along with the writing of the text?
Um, gosh, I don't know how it goes for most people. This is my first book. It actually just flowed really easily. And the very first draft I have is almost exactly what made it to the book. There was a few tweaks along the way. I had a lot of people look at it for me and um, add a few things, but it actually flowed pretty easily for this first book. I'm actually working on my second book right now, and it's not as easy for some reason. Maybe because the first book I probably actually thought about it for a lot more than what it feels like, you know, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, boom, you're starting the second one and you're starting cold. I haven't had a lot of
Mhm.
time to sort of percolate on the second one. And
Oh,
so,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, but the first thing that goes into it is a lot of research. So I had taken cognitive behavioral therapy courses. I actually have a degree in psychology going
Oh,
way back,
cool.
yeah, in the day when I went to university. So a lot of research actually went into the book about um, how does, because anxiety manifests itself differently actually in adults than it does in children, as does depression. They look differently. We have different abilities to regulate our emotions. So I went back and did, even though I'd worked with children for 30 years, I went back and took a couple courses and did a lot of research. That took years. So as I'm doing the research, little ideas for, oh, I have to put something about this in the book or something about this in the book. And I just started making a list of all the sort of events that needed to happen or a timeline that needed to happen, all the things I wanted to touch on. So in Sammy's worry, it was, I made a list of what are the main physical sensations that you feel when you're anxious, from anxiety just starting to when you're in a full-blown panic attack. What does that feel like in the
Mhm.
body? And I made a progression of those things. And then that's how the story arc formed, was along that progression of symptoms, for lack of a better word.
That's really interesting because, like, you think, like, oh, it's easy to write a picture, but you don't need to do any research. Just write some words. And it's like, no, that you did a lot of research there to like
Yeah,
figure out what to write about, what to talk about,
yeah.
or what to discuss in the text. And I think that was interesting because, like, I think I mean, it's easy to think that, oh, picture books are easy, but not really. A
Yeah,
lot of things that seem
yeah,
easy on the surface because they're maybe a lot is big, maybe not, no, they're maybe not 100,000 pages or whatever, hundred
yeah,
thousand words. But there's still so much effort into going into making them right.
yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah.
think it's almost even harder almost because you don't have so much space to play with. You have to play with a little bit
Oh,
smaller amount of space to work in.
that is so true. I don't know if you've ever had to write an essay for school or something like that,
Yeah.
and you write a brilliant essay, and then the teacher comes back. This happens a lot in university. Edit it, lose 500 words, lose 1,000 words, and it's really, really hard. You think it's perfect the way it is,
Yeah.
but you know, in illustration, there's this concept of economy of line. You know, as a professional portrait artist, I don't have to worry about that. But when you're illustrating, there's this economy of line. I think in children's book, there's also an economy of word. Um, so that it is challenging. You're right. It's something that you don't necessarily think about. But yeah, it was an extra challenge.
Yeah, because for me, like, I'm writing a book and I don't have to worry
Yeah,
about how long it is. I can make it as long as I want, kind of thing.
exactly.
Like, but that's the things I thought about is like that could be an extra challenge. Like, I'm very bad at like being very concise about what I write. Like, I'll write an essay, like, oh, it's a short essay, and then it'll be like end up being 4,000 words, kind of thing. And it'll be like, oh, okay. And I think it is definitely a skill to write concisely and not just write, but
Mhm.
like express things with art and
Oh
things like
yeah,
that
yeah,
concisely, but
yeah.
also without making it still leave an impact on the reader, I think.
And yeah, leave an impact, and still have all the pertinent information that you need to have in there. Yeah, yeah. But the nice thing about doing it as a picture book is you can cheat in a way, because half the information or more is in a picture format. So
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
you can
So
take all those things out, those extra wordy
yeah,
things, and then
and
nuance
show
them
them.
into an illustration. Yeah.
Yeah. So you put it together and you made the dummy book and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Uh, when was the point? Because I believe you got it published with Ingram Spark. When was the point when was the point that you thought this is ready? Well, this is ready to get
Um, I guess,
you
yeah,
know
when I did the final illustration and I had already had the book, the text edited many times,
yeah
yeah, I contacted. So there's different types of publishing houses out there. There's traditional publishing, um, and then there's independent publishing, and then there's a partnership publishing. I
yeah
went with a partnership publishing just because it was my first time. So a partnership publishing is like a hybrid model between
yeah
traditional, yeah. So
and
traditional
so
publishing, you just get a a portion of the, you get a portion of the proceeds. But with when you do self-publishing, you get all of it. So that's what
Yeah.
I was I was interested in that. And
Oh yeah, that sounds
and
good.
yeah, and having more control too, right? I mean, I
Mhm.
didn't want to have to send it off to a publisher and have them say, this is great, but you're a completely unknown. I think we're going to have someone else do all the illustrations. I mean, I was extremely passionate about the illustrations, or I didn't want to
Mhm.
have it. The other thing happened too, where actually, no, you know what? We love the illustrations. We're going to have somebody else write the story. I really believed in what I did, and I wanted to leave it as was. So I thought self-publishing would be the best option for me. When you do traditional self-publishing, though, you are responsible for every step of the way
Oh yeah,
yourself.
yeah.
Yeah, so everything from formatting it to, do you
Oh,
want to
exactly.
now have a website? Do marketing's huge, right?
Oh yeah.
So the model I went with, you get put into a pipeline where they do all this for you. So they edit it for you, they will format it for you, they create a book backgrounder for you, they create a website for you, a whole marketing team phones you and talks about, because marketing's different for different types of people.
Oh yeah.
I'm not the kind of person that wants to dress up and hop on an airplane. Well, we couldn't during COVID anyways, as this was published during COVID, but to
Mhm.
be driving around and flying around to all different parts of the country doing a book tour. I didn't want to have to do that. I'm extremely introverted. So my marketing platform was an online marketing plan. So they do all of that kind of stuff for you. And I have a friend who actually published a book right before me, and she went traditional self-published. And it ended up being about the same cost. She ended up, because she had to pay all these people to do these
Oh
separate
yeah.
for her. And it kind of all ended up, what I ended up paying was, equivalent to what she paid anyway. So you have a little bit of your own money that you have to put up front when you're self-publishing,
Yeah.
unlike traditional publishing. But then you get the proceeds aside from the cost of printing.
Oh
You get,
yes.
yeah, printing's actually,
But that's just cost. Yeah. So
yeah, you got to do it. It's, yeah,
no matter where you go, it's like, well, in traditional publishing, well, you're just going to get a portion of the proceeds anyway, and that's the rest is going to go to print kind of thing. It's kind
yes,
of like, so it's almost the same. It's almost the same. You get printing costs as cost money wherever you go.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
That's interesting because like one of the things is yeah, self-publishing or hybrid
Hmm.
publishing gives you definitely a little more control, especially if because
Hmm.
a lot of picture books I see will be written by someone, written by someone, illustrated by someone, and like put together with someone else.
Yeah,
And it's kind of like a lot of these people. There's a lot of people that probably just want to have this vision of what the entire thing that they want to do, and
yeah,
yet again, writing a like just a written book is different because you're like, well, someone will do the cover. I don't really not too passionate. Like, the cover's got to be good, but like,
yeah,
I'm not like the cover's not my life's work. Like,
yes,
it's the written stuff, and
yes,
the traditional publisher, well, they can figure out the how they want it to look. And I mean, I'll probably have to be able to do like yes or no, but like
yes,
kind of thing.
yeah,
But a picture book, I think there's so many more elements to it, and I think hybrid publishing is a really interesting way to go because
yeah.
you get definitely more control, but you also get help because that's one of the things that self-publishing can often be hard. It's like, oh my goodness, I have to hire people to do, I have to help people. I have to, yeah,
Yeah,
can be
and where do you begin? And for me,
hmm.
like things that I didn't even think of, like marketing, like I'm sure I
Oh
could
yeah.
figure out. I mean, I have an art website that my son made me, so I'm sure if I needed a website built for the book, yes, he could do that. Or there's a lot of things I could have probably figured out myself,
Oh yeah.
but there was things that I didn't even know where to begin. Like how do you market a book that is not
Hmm.
going to be mainstream?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Because it's often if you're marketing a book that's like, say, traditionally published, like, oh, buy it wherever books are sold. It's like, okay, maybe not.
yeah,
Technically, I think Ingram Scarf you
yeah,
can put it in bookstores, but it's
yeah.
not always worth it to do that.
It's not for the commission they take. Yeah,
No.
it's, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But so during that process, what were the things you look back on and think, I would have done that differently? What things would you have done differently to make it a little easier, a little better,
Hmm,
or just a little bit,
hmm.
whichever you think we would have done differently?
I'm I'm not sure I would do anything differently. I had such a
That's really
great,
good.
yeah, this time around I had such a great experience. I mean, I like I said, I did the research first. Oh boy, what a good question. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, actually, that I feel that I dropped the ball on or would have done different. In terms of printing it,